The sun hung low in the sky of Telvaris, painting the golden grain fields in warm light. The air smelled of dust and harvest. The sound of wind moved gently over the crops, bending them like the waves of a quiet sea. In the middle of one field, a young man worked alone. His name was Kyle. His clothes were simple, his boots worn from years of labor. His back was bent as he swung the cutting tool again and again, gathering the tall grain into neat bundles. To anyone passing by, Kyle was just another farm worker. The alien empire had ruled Telvaris for more than 100 years, and many humans like Kyle spent their lives in the fields, unseen and unimportant in the eyes of their rulers. Kale never argued, never spoke much, and never drew attention to himself. At least that was what everyone believed. On that same morning, far from the fields, a royal transport glided along the white stone road. Inside it sat Princess Arinya, daughter of the Emperor of the Veyran Dominion. Her skin was pale silver, her eyes bright like cold water. She wore the ceremonial robes of her station, a long flowing fabric that shimmered in the light. She had come to see the countryside for the first time. The Emperor had told her it was wise to learn about the lands they ruled. Arinya looked out the wide window of the transport, her expression calm and distant. The farmland stretched far into the horizon. To her, it all seemed the same. Rows of crops, scattered houses, and small human workers who bowed their heads as the transport passed. When the royal convoy slowed near the largest field, Arinya's gaze settled on a lone worker. She noticed how he moved, steady, precise, never wasting emotion. His dark hair was tied back, and his face was calm but unreadable. She assumed he was just another peasant. There were millions like him across the empire. She did not think of him again. The convoy stopped at the edge of the field, so the princess could walk a little and breathe the fresh air. Several Veyran guards stepped out first, scanning the area with their tall energy spears ready. The air was still, except for the rustle of grain. While Arinya walked along the edge of the crop rows, Kale continued his work, only glancing once toward the group. His eyes briefly met hers, and she felt a strange moment of recognition, though she knew she had never seen him before. He quickly looked away and kept cutting. A pair of alien soldiers passed by, speaking in low voices. "The rebels are moving again," one said in the Veyran tongue. "There was trouble in the hills last night." Kale's head tilted slightly. He understood their language, though he kept his face blank. He stored the words in his mind, but did not show any sign of interest. Then it happened. One of the royal hover carriages behind the main transport suddenly hissed and tilted to the side. A sharp crack split the air as part of its support frame gave way. A guard standing on the carriage platform lost his footing and fell toward the ground, his spear clattering away. Everything happened in seconds. The guard would have struck the hard earth, but Kyle dropped his tool and dashed forward. His movements were fast and sure. He caught the falling guard by the arm and steadied him, pulling him back upright with a strength that seemed surprising for a farm worker. The guard stared at him in shock, breathing hard. "You caught me," he said in disbelief. Kyle simply nodded and stepped back, his face calm once more. "You were falling," he said softly, as if it were nothing. Arinya had seen the whole thing. She raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She was impressed by the speed and strength he had shown, though she told herself it was just luck. The royal mechanics repaired the hover carriage quickly. The convoy prepared to leave again. Arinya glanced one last time at the young man in the field. He had already returned to his work, swinging the blade through the grain with smooth rhythm. "Strange," she murmured to herself. "For a peasant, he moves like a trained fighter." But the thought passed quickly. The Veyran believed no human could truly challenge them. This was just a farm worker, nothing more. As the royal transport pulled away, Kyle watched it go from the corner of his eye. His hands worked, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought of the rebels in the hills, of the alien words he had overheard, and of the ancient stories his grandfather had once told him, stories of a time before the Veyran came, when humans carried blades of light and defended their own worlds. Kyle bent his head and kept working, but deep in his chest, something stirred. A quiet fire. The princess had looked at him as if he were nobody. Perhaps for now that was true. But he knew the day would come when he could no longer hide who he really was. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the fields. The wind rose again, whispering through the grain, as if carrying old secrets. Far away, the royal convoy disappeared into the hills, carrying the princess back to her father's palace, unaware that her path and Kyle's would cross again in a way that would change the fate of the planet. For Kale, the day ended like many others. He gathered the last bundles of grain, carried them to the storage shed, and washed the dust from his hands in the cool stream. But his eyes kept drifting toward the horizon, toward the city lights that began to glow as night came. He remembered the words of the soldiers, rebels in the hills. That was not new. What mattered was the timing. Whispers had reached the villages in recent weeks about something the Empire feared. A relic, a weapon from the time before conquest. Kale sat on the steps of the small wooden house where he lived, staring into the night sky. Stars blinked above, cold and far away. He wondered if the legends were true, that somewhere out there, hidden or forgotten, lay the Starblade. And if the Starblade truly existed, he wondered if it would ever find its way into the hands of someone willing to use it. A small smile touched his lips, though there was no one to see it. The wind moved softly through the grain once more, as if answering him. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the hills, trouble was already on the move. And Kale knew, without knowing why, that he would not be in the fields forever. The night in Telvaris was colder in the hills. The wind carried the scent of pine and stone, and the stars were sharper here, like points of glass in the dark sky. A small campfire burned low in a hidden valley, where a group of human rebels gathered. Their voices were quiet, their faces lit by the flickering orange light. "We have only one chance," said Joran, the leader, a man with gray at his temples and sharp eyes. "Tomorrow night, the Veyran will move the relics from the old city vault. They are sending them to the off-world fortress. Once they are gone, we will never see them again." A younger rebel leaned forward. "Is the Starblade really among them? Or is it just another story to give us hope?" Joran's gaze hardened. "I have seen the transport list. It is there. The Veyran fear it. They will guard it heavily." Around the fire, the rebels exchanged looks. The Starblade was more than a weapon. It was a symbol. In old human tales, it had been wielded by a champion who had defended the free worlds. It was said the blade could cut through any armor, and that it responded to the courage of its wielder. Far from the campfire, Kale sat on a rock, listening. He had arrived only an hour ago, carrying no weapon but the long knife he used in the fields. Most rebels did not know him well. He kept to himself and rarely joined their missions. When Joran finished speaking, Kale stood. "I will go with you," he said simply. Some of the rebels turned to look at him. A few frowned. One laughed softly. You are a farmer. This is not cutting grain. The convoy will have soldiers, drones, and heavy armor." Kyle met their eyes calmly. "I can help." Joran studied him for a long moment. Something in Kale's steady voice made the older man pause. Finally, he nodded. "Very well. You will come. But you follow my orders. If you slow us down, you stay behind." Kyle gave a single nod. Understood. In the palace of Veyran Prime, far from the hills, Princess Arinya sat in her private chamber, the walls lined with silver patterns that caught the light of the tall windows. She had returned from her countryside trip, But her mind had not forgotten the quiet human worker she had seen. That evening she overheard voices in the grand hall. Her father, the emperor, was speaking with one of his highest generals. She stopped in the shadow of a column, listening. "The relics leave tomorrow night," the emperor said. "The Starblade is the most dangerous of them. It must never be in human hands again. If it is, the old rebellions will rise once more. We will end their hope before it begins." The general bowed. "It will be sealed and guarded, my lord. No human will touch it." Arinya's eyes narrowed slightly. She had heard of the Starblade in passing, but only as a forgotten piece of history. Why did her father fear it so much? And why did he sound almost worried? When the voices faded, she stepped back into her chamber, her thoughts unsettled. She knew she should put it from her mind, yet she could not shake the image of the human in the field, moving with speed and strength. She wondered if he would have looked at the Starblade differently than her father did. By the following night, the sky over Telvaris was heavy with low clouds, and the moon was hidden. The convoy of relics moved along the wide sky bridge, a road of white stone and steel that stretched over the deep canyon known as the Rift of Winds. The Veyran guards marched in formation, their armor gleaming in the dim light. Hover carts carried the sealed crates, each marked with warning symbols. One of these crates, longer and slimmer than the rest, contained the Starblade. High above the bridge, in the dark ledges of the canyon walls, Kale and the rebels waited. The wind roared through the canyon, masking the faint clink of their gear. Joran's voice was barely a whisper. When they reached the center of the bridge, "We strike." Kale's gaze was fixed on the long crate. His heartbeat was steady, but his hands itched to hold the weapon inside. He did not know why he felt drawn to it so strongly. Below, the convoy slowed slightly as the lead scout signaled a check. It was the moment they had been waiting for. "Now," Joran breathed. From the shadows, the rebels dropped smoke canisters, filling the bridge with thick gray clouds. They moved quickly, cutting down the guards' visibility. Small energy bolts flashed through the mist as the Veyran shouted orders. Kale leapt down, landing lightly on the bridge floor. He moved with precision, slipping past one guard and striking another's weapon aside. The rebels rushed forward, engaging the soldiers. In the middle of the chaos, two guards tried to drag the long crate toward a transport. A shot from one rebel's rifle struck the crate's locking clamps, sending it sliding across the bridge toward the edge. Kale saw it moving. Without thinking, he sprinted. The crate teetered at the side, one end hanging over the canyon. Kale reached it just as it began to fall. His hands gripped the edge, pulling it back with a sharp heave. The weight nearly dragged him forward, but he steadied himself. The impact of the rescue shook the crate enough that one of the remaining seals broke. A faint hum came from inside. Kyle's fingers found the latch, and before he could think, he opened it. Inside lay the Starblade. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. Its hilt was of dark silver, etched with flowing lines, and from it rose a faint shimmer in the air, as if the weapon was waiting to awaken. His hand closed around it. Surge of warmth and strength spread through him, not painful but powerful, as if the blade itself recognized him. The hum deepened, resonating in the air. Somewhere through the thinning smoke, a voice called his name. Not a rebel's voice, but the clear tone of Princess Arinya. She had come with the convoy as an observer, and now she stood frozen, watching the peasant from the fields hold a weapon her father had sworn no human could lift. Kale turned slightly, the Starblade steady in his grip. The wind tore at his hair, and the hum of the blade cut through the chaos like a living thing. The Veyran soldiers faltered. Some even stepped back. In that moment, Arinya's belief that he was nothing more than a simple worker shattered, and Kyle, without knowing it, had taken the first step toward changing the fate of Telvaris forever. The wind roared through the Rift of Winds, shaking the sky bridge beneath their feet. Smoke curled around the fighting figures, hiding faces and making every shadow seem alive. The rebels and the Veyran soldiers clashed in the half-light. There, weapons flashing in quick bursts. Kale stood in the center of the bridge, the star blade in his hand. The hum of the weapon was steady now, like the deep heartbeat of some great beast. The air around it seemed sharper, the wind carrying its faint, silver shimmer. Princess Arinya stared from only a few paces away. She had never seen the blade outside the palace vault. She had never seen it in the hands of a human. How are you holding that?" she asked, her voice low but carrying over the noise. Kale's eyes flicked to her. "It seems the blade decided I could." Before she could answer, two Veyran soldiers rushed him from the side. Kale's arm moved almost on its own. The star blade swept in a single, clean arc. The soldiers' spears split in half as if they were made of glass, and both attackers fell back, stunned. Arinya's eyes widened. "That is not possible." Kale did not stay to talk. The rebels were being pushed back on the left flank, and Joran's voice called for aid. Kale moved toward the fight, the star blade cutting through energy bolts before they could strike. The Veyran forces were disciplined, their armor strong, but their weapons could not match the strange precision of the blade in Kale's hands. Every time he moved, it was as though the weapon knew exactly where it needed to be. Arinya found herself moving closer, partly out of curiosity, partly to protect the relics. She saw one soldier take aim at Kale's unguarded side. Without thinking, she raised her own ceremonial staff and struck the soldier's arm, knocking his shot wide. Kale glanced back at her for just a second. "Why help me?" "I am not sure." "Yet," she replied. The battle thickened as more Veyran reinforcements charged onto the bridge from the city side. The rebels were now outnumbered 2-1. Smoke drifted apart in places, showing the sheer drop of the canyon on either side. "Fall back," Joran called. "We cannot hold this spot." But Kale's gaze stayed on the long line of armored soldiers blocking the retreat. If they ran, they would be hunted down before they could reach the hills. He stepped forward, the star blade rising in both hands. Arinya recognized the stance. It was not something a farmer would know. It was the stance of a trained fighter. The front line of Veyran soldiers hesitated. The hum of the star blade grew louder, and for a moment even the wind seemed to pause. Then Kale moved. He struck once, twice, 3 times. Each blow cut through armor plating that should have been unbreakable. Sparks and fragments scattered across the bridge. The soldiers tried to close in, but his speed was unnatural. He turned and struck again, forcing them back. The rebels seized the moment. They surged forward with shouts, pushing through the gap Kyle had made. Arinya stepped into the fight beside him, her staff whirling to block and strike. She was not as fast as Kale, but she moved with the confidence of someone who had been trained since childhood. One soldier tried to seize the star blade from Kale. The instant his hand touched the hilt, a shock of energy threw him backward across the bridge. He lay still, the weapon untouched by anyone but Kyle. Arinya saw it all. The blade did not just work for Kyle, it seemed to reject anyone else. That was something her father had never told her. The tide of battle shifted again when a deep metallic thud echoed from the far side of the bridge. A large Veyran war machine, tall as a house, strode forward, its heavy legs shaking the stone. Its twin cannons began to charge, a low hum building. Joran shouted in alarm, "Scatter!" The first shot ripped through the smoke and struck the bridge floor, tearing away stone and sending debris into the canyon. The second cannon locked onto the rebels retreating toward the hills. Kale did not think. He ran toward the machine, Arinya just a few steps behind. The cannons fired again, but Kale slid low under the blast, sparks raining around him. He came up close to one of the legs and drove the star blade straight into the joint. The weapon cut through metal like it was cloth. The machine shuddered and tilted. Arinya struck the other leg joint with her staff's energy tip, breaking its balance. With a final groan, the war machine toppled sideways, crashing down onto the bridge railing and sliding into the rift below. For a moment, the battlefield went still. The rebels, seeing the machine destroyed, rallied again. The Veyran soldiers, shocked by the loss, began to pull back toward the city side. Joran's voice rose over the wind. "We have the opening! Move!" The rebels withdrew in a loose group, carrying the smaller relic crates they had managed to secure. Kale kept to the rear with Arinya beside him, the star blade still humming in his hand. When they finally reached the rocky trails beyond the bridge, the night was quiet again, except for the wind. The bridge was now only a faint outline behind them. Arinya stopped and faced Kale. "You are not what you seem," she said simply. Kale met her eyes. "Neither are you." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "My father says that blade is dangerous, that humans must never wield it." "And what do you think?" Kale asked. "I think," she said slowly, "that I have just seen a man use it to save lives, mine included. That makes me question everything I have been told." Kyle did not reply. He simply turned toward the mountains, where the rebels were already disappearing into the dark. The Starblade's hum was softer now, but still present, like a reminder of what had just happened. Arinya watched him go, her thoughts a tangle of duty, doubt, and something new she could not yet name. She knew one thing for certain. This so-called peasant had just changed the course of her life. And somewhere deep, inside, she had the feeling he was going to change far more than that. The sun rose slowly over the mountains surrounding Dawnspire. The ancient fortress sat hidden in a quiet valley, its stone walls covered in moss and vines. Inside, the rebels moved with purpose, preparing for what would come next. Kyle stood near the center of the main hall, the Starblade resting in a stand beside him. The soft hum of the blade was still there, as if it waited patiently for him. The doors of the hall opened suddenly. Arinya stepped inside, her face serious but calm. She had left her royal guards behind and came alone, disguised in simple clothes. Her silver skin was still clear in the soft light, but she tried not to stand out. Kale looked up and nodded. "You came." She nodded back. "I wanted to see. I wanted to understand." The room was silent for a moment. Then Kale spoke. "This place, it is hidden for a reason." Arinya's eyes searched his. "The Empire says that humans are weak, that we should not hold weapons or power." Kyle smiled faintly. "They want to keep us in the fields, to forget who we were." Arinya stepped closer, her voice dropping. "Who are you, really?" Kale took a deep breath. "I was not always a farmer. My family kept the old ways alive in secret. We trained in the ancient arts, passed down from those who remembered freedom." He gestured toward the Starblade. "This blade is part of that history. It chooses its wielder, not by blood, but by heart." Arinya studied him closely. "Why hide it? Why not fight?" "Because we were few and scattered," Kale said, "and the Empire's power was too great. We waited. We hoped." Arinya thought of her father, the Emperor, and his harsh words. "He calls you rebels. Traitors." Kyle shook his head. "We are not traitors. We want to be free." The princess looked away, her mind heavy with doubt. She had always believed her father's story, that humans were weak and dangerous. But here, in this hidden fortress, the truth felt different. Suddenly, the sound of boots echoed in the corridor outside. The rebels tensed, hands moving to weapons. Kale placed a hand on the Starblade's stand. A young scout entered, breathless. "The Empire is coming. A large force is moving this way. They know where we are." The room filled with murmurs of alarm. Joran appeared behind the scout, his face grim. "We must prepare to defend Dawnspire." Kyle nodded. "I will lead." "The fighters." Arinya stepped forward. "I will help." Some rebels looked surprised. A princess aiding rebels was almost unheard of, but Arinya's voice was firm. I have seen the Empire's cruelty. I want to make things right. Kyle gave a slight bow of respect. Then we stand together. The rebels moved quickly to arm themselves. Kyle strapped the Starblade to his side. Arinya took a simple sword from a weapons rack, its blade dull but sturdy. Outside, the sky darkened as clouds gathered. The wind carried the distant sound of marching feet and the hum of alien machines. The Empire was coming for them. The battle began at dawn. The Empire's forces moved like a storm, heavy and relentless. Their soldiers wore shining armor and carried weapons that fired bolts of energy. Machines rolled forward, crushing the earth beneath their feet. Kyle stood on the fortress wall, watching the approaching army. The Starblade was at his side, warm against his skin. "Hold your ground," Joran shouted. "We defend our home." Arinya fought beside Kale, her sword flashing in the early light. She moved with grace and determination, protecting the rebels and the fortress gates. The first wave of soldiers hit the walls with blasts of energy. The stone shook, but the defenders held firm. Kale felt the Starblade hum stronger with every clash. Its power seemed to grow with his courage. He led a charge down the ramparts, cutting through enemy lines with speed and skill. The rebels followed. Inspired by his strength, Arinya saw the change in the soldiers' faces, fear where there had been confidence before. The blade was more than a weapon. It was a symbol of hope. During a brief pause in the fighting, Arinya found Kyle near the central courtyard. His clothes were torn, but his eyes shone with fire. "Why fight so hard?" she asked. Kyle looked at her. "Because this is our home, our future." She nodded slowly. "I want to help you, not as a princess, but as someone who believes." Kyle smiled. "That means more than you know." The sounds of battle grew louder again. They moved to rejoin the fight. Hours passed. The sun climbed high, and the Empire's forces pushed harder. Kale faced the enemy general in single combat near the fortress gate. The man was tall, his armor decorated with badges of rank. The general sneered. "Give up, human! Your fight is over." Kale gripped the Starblade tighter. "Not yet." They clashed. The general's heavy sword struck hard, but Kale moved faster, the Starblade blocking and cutting with perfect precision. With a final strike, Kale disarmed the general and forced him back. The rebel fighters cheered, pushing the enemy into retreat. When the last enemy had fled, the rebels gathered, weary but victorious. Arinya approached Kale. "You are more than a peasant. You are a leader." Kyle shook his head. "I am just one man, but together we can change everything." She looked at the fortress walls, the rising sun painting gold on the stones. "This is only the beginning," she said. Kyle nodded. The Starblade has chosen well, and as the wind blew softly through Dawnspire, a new hope was born. A hope that humans and aliens might one day stand together, not as enemies, but as allies. The sky over Dawnspire was heavy and gray. Thick clouds covered the sun, making the ancient stone fortress look dark and cold. The wind whispered through the empty halls and over the high walls. The rebels inside knew what was coming. The Empire's army was returning, and this time they would not stop until they took Dawnspire. Kale stood on the highest tower, looking out at the distant lines of soldiers and machines. Their armor shone dimly through the mist. Thousands of Veyran troops marched steadily forward, ready to crush the rebel stronghold. Their war machines rolled like giant beasts, shaking the ground with every step. "Kyle," Joran said from behind, "we must prepare. They will attack before nightfall." Kyle nodded, tightening the grip on the Starblade's hilt. The blade hummed softly like it was alive and ready. Inside the fortress, Arinya moved quickly, helping the rebels organize their defenses. She had grown stronger since she joined them. Her sword skills improved, but more than that, she had gained the trust of the fighters. They no longer saw her only as a princess. They saw her as one of their own. She stopped near a group of young rebels and spoke quietly. "We must hold the walls. Our lives and the future of our people depend on it." The rebels nodded, their faces set with determination. As the day wore on, the Empire's forces closed in. Scouts reported that the Veyran were building siege engines and preparing energy cannons. The air was filled with the distant sounds of construction and the steady beat of marching feet. Kale gathered the leaders in the war room, a dim space filled with maps and ancient weapons. "We cannot hold forever," he said, "but we can use the fortress to slow them down. We must strike when they least expect it." Joran looked grim. "The Veyran have drones that scout ahead. We cannot surprise them easily." Kyle looked at the map, then at the faces of his friends. "Then we must use the Star Blade." A hush fell over the room. Arinya spoke softly. "What do you mean?" "The blade's power is greater than any of us know," Kale said. "It can cut through energy shields and machines. If I can reach their war engines, I can destroy them from within." Joran shook his head. "That is suicide." Kale met his gaze. "If I do not try, we will all die." The room stayed silent for a moment, then Arinya stood. "I will go with you." Kale's eyes widened. "No, it is too dangerous." She smiled faintly. "I am not afraid." The others looked at each other. Finally, Joran nodded. "Then we prepare. At night we strike." The sun sank below the clouds, and darkness spread over Dawnspire. The rebels gathered their weapons and cloaked themselves in shadows. Kyle and Arinya led the small team out through a secret gate, hidden beneath the fortress. The night was cold and quiet, broken only by the distant sounds of the enemy camp. They moved like ghosts through the trees, silent and careful. As they approached the war engines, Kale felt the star blade grow warm. The blade's hum was louder now, like a steady drum beating in his chest. The Veyran had built massive machines, tall and powerful, with glowing energy cores. They were the heart of the siege, and if destroyed, the entire attack would fall apart. Kale signaled the group to spread out. Arinya kept close to him, her sword ready. Suddenly, a sentry's alarm blared, and red lights flashed. The enemy had seen them. "Now!" Kyle shouted. They rushed forward, cutting through guards and dodging energy blasts. The star blade glowed as Kale struck at the machine's legs and energy cores. Sparks flew and metal screamed as the blade cut. Deeper. Arinya fought off the soldiers, trying to stop them, her sword moving fast and true. Together, they pushed through the defenses. One by one, the war engines fell. The machines groaned and collapsed in clouds of dust and flame. Back at the fortress, the noise of battle faded. The Empire's attack slowed, confused by the loss of their heavy weapons. The rebels used the chance to press their advantage. They poured out of the gates and pushed the enemy back. Kale and Arinya returned, their faces tired but proud. The star blade's glow had dimmed, but it still pulsed softly like it was resting. Joran met them at the gate. "You have changed the battle," he said. "The Empire will think twice before attacking again." Arinya looked at the fortress walls. "This fight is not over, but we have hope." Kale nodded. "And hope is a stronger weapon than any blade." That night, Kale stood on the wall looking up at the stars. The wind was calm, and the fortress felt alive with quiet strength. Arinya joined him, her eyes shining. "You carry more than a weapon," she said. "You carry the future," Kyle smiled. "And you carry the courage to face it." Together, they watched the sky, knowing the fight was far from done, but for the first time, they believed the dawn would come.